All right, so we talked about gathering supporting data for your speech. Now let's talk about how to integrate that into your speech. Chapter 8 deals with how you can use your supporting data. And we've already said this, but I want to say it again. A speech should be full of supporting data, data that amplifies and clarifies the ideas that you're trying to get across. It is a good rule of thumb to load up on supporting data. Have more than you can use. Have more in your mind even than ends up in your notes on your speech, so that if you feel like in the moment you need to elaborate, you have some resource material that you have looked at, that you've drawn from, that you haven't even put into the speech that you can access if needed. The same is true for preaching. If you're preaching on a subject like the grace of God, you may study that subject very broadly, and then you have that broad expanse of knowledge in your mind as you formulate your notes that are driven to a specific topic and a specific purpose. But whenever you get to preaching on the subject, you may find yourself uh, inspired to talk about something that you saw in your study that you didn't necessarily think would be a part of this sermon, but in the moment, it seems right. Always have more supporting data than you think you can use. What this does is it helps your speech stay lively. It helps it stay interesting. It helps you keep from falling flat on your face. It supports you. It elaborates what you're saying. It proves what you're saying, and it holds the interest of your audience. Nancy Duarte, the author of Resonate, said that personal stories are the emotional glue that connect you to or connect your audience to your message. Personal stories are the emotional glue that connects your audience to your message. You want to get the two glued together. You want to get them stuck together. You want to get some Velcro on your idea that sticks to your audience. These personal stories are the Velcro that will stick to your audience. So use examples. The right kind of examples can breathe life into speech. The right kind of examples can have a tremendous impact on speech. And there are a couple of different kinds of examples given in your book. Short examples are examples that support a specific point. They may be no more than a sentence or two, and their strength lies in stringing several of them together. You may list them in a series, and the first one may not have that big of an impact, but by the time you've got the preponderance of 3 or 4 of them in a row, all of a sudden you've established now a flow of information, a pattern, if you will, that reinforces your thesis. Another type of example is an extended example. This is more known in our circles as an illustration, a sermon illustration, or a narrative, or an anecdote. These are more detailed and vivid than your brief examples. They're built much more like a story. They have an opening, they reveal a complication, they contain a climax, and then they describe a resolution. And you use them to reinforce your topic, to reinforce what you're trying to persuade your audience of. Narrative examples are longer than short examples. They consume more time, but they're also more emotionally compelling, and they add a real sense of drama to your speech. So be sure when you're considering ways that you can use your personal experience or the experience of others, be sure to consider these extended narratives that maybe take up a big bulk of your speech time, but really drive your point home. Another type of example is a hypothetical. And if you're using a hypothetical, you're describing an imaginary situation that did not really happen, and it's ethically sound to make sure that your audience knows you're using a hypothetical. If you want to evaluate the kind of examples that you're using and whether or not they're good and credible, there's a checklist in section 8.1D in your textbook, and it'll tell you the things that you need to look at. Examples have to reinforce, they have to clarify, they have to personalize your ideas, and they need to relate to your listeners. Another area of support that you can use is explanations and descriptions. We use explanations to clarify what we said. It's how we facilitate understanding. We use descriptions to produce fresh and motivating word pictures that are designed to provoke sensory reactions. We want somebody to feel the cool breeze, to know how hot it was, to have experience vicariously through our words the experience that we're trying to describe to them. So your descriptions need to be as vivid as possible. They need to make listeners feel as if they were there. It's important whenever you're using examples and explanations and descriptions that you assess them, that you make sure that they are qualified, that they meet the criteria needed. There's a checklist at chapter 8.2C, and I'm going to say this over and over because every type of support we're going to talk about has a checklist in the book, and I'm going to point you to it every time. But 8.2C contains a checklist that I'll ask you, how does your audience, how are they going to respond to the explanation? Are you using explanation to deliver information that the audience doesn't know? Are you avoiding over-explaining or under-explaining? Is the description that you're giving rich in detail? Will the subject of the description become more alive for the listeners? Are they going to benefit from the description? And have I been appropriately selective in choosing what I explain or describe to the audience? Another area of support that you can draw on is definitions. Definitions help bridge cultural divides. They enhance audience understanding and they facilitate audience acceptance of your ideas. Definitions are useful when audience members may be unfamiliar with the way you're using key terms, or when they might have different associations for words or concepts than you have. Things that you should define are technical terms. If you're using highly technical language, you need to make sure that your audience understands the language. If you're using words with specialized meanings, again, you need to clarify that your audience knows what those specialized meanings are. If you're using words that are rarely used, if you're pulling out one of those 10-cent words and laying it out there, you need to remember that those words may need to be defined. They may need to be explained. A word that's been used in a unique or unusual way may also need to be defined. And finally, a word that has two or more meanings, where there could be some ambiguity about what you mean, then you need to stop and define the word. When you're defining a word, you need to do it in a way that contributes to the overall goal and purpose of the speech. You need to do it in a way that's easily understood. Listen, you are not a dictionary. Don't try to be a dictionary. Don't go to Webster and read what Webster wrote when you're defining a term. Make it real, make it understandable, put it in simple language, and put it in language that contributes to the overall goal and purpose of your speech.